This episode of the Bitcoin Economy is brought to you in part by Ledin.
Need cash but don't want to sell your Bitcoin? Ledin is the global leader in Bitcoin-backed loans, issuing over 9 billion loans since 2018. And they were the first to offer proof of reserves.
With Ledin, you get custody loans, no credit checks, no monthly payments, and more. Visit ledn.io for more information. Welcome back to the Bitcoin Economy. We are here with Eric Jackson and a longtime friend of mine, Drew Nagda, who's been in the real estate space for quite some time. So I figured as we're talking Opendoor, why not bring a buddy of the pod on and have Drew come on? So welcome both of you guys. Eric, at this point, obviously, I don't think you need an introduction. If you've been on Twitter the past, I'd say 6 months, a year, people should know who you are. You've been an absolute force, part-time analyst, part-time showman. You're sitting outside Drake's house, spreading the Opendoor gospel.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, when I was a doctoral student, I had this professor who was pretty famous at the time. He studied like the effects of, management team members and directors on their company's performance, and they tried to really see what's the difference between a great CEO and just an average CEO or a great director. And there's all kinds of people spout off with all kinds of opinions about what's important. Especially you hear this sometimes when people talk about boards, oh, we should have a more diverse board, or, oh, we should have a younger board. We have too many old board members, or whatever, different variety of backgrounds. But nobody's actually ever done the work to study empirically if any of that stuff is actually linked to performance, or whether, we just dreamed this up and we just sort of, just talk, the consultants talk about it, but it's not really tied to reality. And so we did this big, long project. It took well over a year. And at the end of the day, the big so what was that we figured out that from a board perspective, at least, the only thing that mattered out of about 50 different, commonly spouted prescriptions, the only thing that mattered was skin in the game. Basically, did any of these directors meaningfully dig into their own pockets and buy, could have been $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 worth of stock. And what we found is if you had one person who did that, you were way more likely to see in the next 3 years that stock would outperform the market by a meaningful amount. If you had two people or more that bought at least 100 grand worth of stock, your odds went even higher. And if you had three, it was astronomical, how much more you outperform the market. And so it was and what we also found is in terms of if the company actually gave them stock or gave them RSUs or stock options or whatever, a lot of times, companies say, oh yeah, they're incented because now they're aligned with the rest of the shareholders because we gave them stock. Not true at all. It is basically people treat it like found money. It's I walked down the street, oh, $5, and it's great. It's not a real. I didn't have to work to earn that money. It's I just sort of stumbled into it. So, so for Carvana, one thing I was familiar with the company, and I made a lot of money trading it from 2017 to 2021, early 2021, because the stock went from $10 IPO to $400, and then all of a sudden the interest rates rise and this thing crashed from 400 to under 100 at the beginning of 2022, and then as 2022 went along, it just got worse and worse. But I noticed that the CEO of Carvana, this guy named Ernie Garcia Jr., he bought $50 million dollars worth of his own stock when it was at $50 a share. And then a few months later, it kept dropping. So it went down to $20 a share. He bought another $20 million worth of stock then at $20 a share. And then the thing still went down. And it went down, didn't bottom until $3.50 at the end of the year, at the end of 2022. But I also noticed that a month before it bottomed at Thanksgiving 2022, when the stock was $7.50, this guy who was a chief product officer bought $3 million worth of stock. And then someone else in the management team bought about $700,000 worth of stock. And then a couple of directors bought, I think it was 100 grand each or something, or 200 grand each. And so you put it all together. One thing I've found, just in researching stock, sometimes you see this on Twitter where people will say, oh, Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, He sold a lot of, I don't know, pick a number, $50 million worth of stock. Oh my God, you should sell this stock. What does he know that we don't know? Well, it turns out nothing. These executives, you should never pay attention to selling stock, because like 99% of executives, they're just always selling stock. They just see it as part of their compensation. It's not a sign of like lack of confidence in the company. It's just like, maybe Brian wanted to buy another house in the Hollywood Hills that's like a $70 million house or whatever, like it's like they have all kinds of reasons. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. But when they buy stock, you want to sit up and take notice, because it doesn't happen very often. For most companies, it's only like a once a 10-year kind of an event. Usually if there's like the COVID pandemic or like Elon Musk, like when all the crap was like swirling around Tesla in 2018 and all his like go private tweet, like, 420, funding secured or whatever it was. Like he ended up like buying a big whack of stock like around that time too. And he made bank on it. Basically nobody sets money on fire. So when I saw it happening at Carvana, like I just knew. And then the guy who bought the $3 million worth of stock, who was this chief product officer, he happened to follow me on Twitter at the time. And so I DM'd him and I was like, hey man, like, can I just have a phone call with you? And when I talked with him, he said, like, he's a totally normal guy. He's from Canada like me. He lives down in Santa Monica now. And he was like, yeah, like I've known Ernie since Stanford. We went to Stanford together, and a lot of the team went to Stanford, and we all like know each other. We trust each other. We believe in the mission of the company. We're in a tough spot right now. Like there's no question. Like everybody's betting against us. We got a lot of debt. We got some wood to chop, but like at the end of the day, I think we can do it. And like I believe in us. And so when I heard that, I was like, for sure these guys are going to come back. So that wasn't the only reason I invested. I mean, there was a bunch of AI kind of signals that we looked at as well, but like that was a big thing.
Yeah. And a lot of what we're talking about now is kind of this, digital transformation of investor relations. We're seeing it live with yourself. We saw GME kind of be that first mainstream, swarm of Reddit influencers starting to, swarm around a stock. And with Bitcoin and digital assets, I think a lot of everything is based off community. And so we're seeing these communities now come into play and really have an effect on retail, right? We have more information now than ever. As you mentioned, when you were at Columbia, ChatGPT did not exist. None of these AI tools existed. And so it took a lot of time to get to this information. And now, you got to double check and make sure that they're not hallucinating these AI programs, but you're able to at least articulate and come to theses and help yourself. You have an extra tool, in your tool shed. And so I believe this is your first tweet. You talked about Open. I tried to use Grok actually to find it. So an AI tool there. But this is where you found on July 14th of this year. So not actually too long ago, right? You said Open was going to be 100 bagger. So I think most people know generally what Open is, but if you can just give a quick synopsis of what Opendoor is. I actually bought first when I had IPO'd, and I remember sitting on it. It went from $10, down, and I ended up selling. And then recently, I do have to say, full transparency, both Drew and I are holders. Eric, you're obviously a holder as well. This is not investment advice, but yeah, if you could just give everyone a quick overview what Opendoor is, that'd be great.
Well, sure. The dream always with Opendoor, and it's been around for like over 10 years as a company, was to be the Amazon of real estate. And what I mean by that is that, rather than use your real estate agent, which is just obviously the traditional model for buying and selling a house, which seems pretty inefficient in today's day and age. And like, why should we be paying like 6% to these agents who don't do a lot of work? It seems like, like the idea was like, what if you could do everything direct? The way that you order an Uber on your app, or like with Carvana, buy and sell your used car, like basically directly on an app. That was the goal always with Opendoor. And so they pioneered this concept called iBuying, where basically like you can go to Opendoor today and you can type in your home address if you wanted to sell your house, and they'd make a bid for you if you're in like certain markets. Like they're the only operating, like it's sort of city by city, in the key cities across the U.S. Although they're expanding that now in a big way. But they would say, hey, we'll buy your house. And let's say it was like, you think it's worth $400,000. They might offer you like $375 or $385 for your house. But they would say, initially, like they would say, hey, but if you accept, we can close in 45 days. And you don't have to have anybody come in your house. You don't, we'll just buy it now because based on the information we know about you, like we don't have to do an inspection, all this kind of stuff. We'll check that later and everything. And so there's a certain section of the population that, they need speed and they need certainty around what they will get for their house. I mean, some of us live in an area where, if we list our house, it might be like 8 months, before we get a bid for it. And, and we hope it's a bid that we like and it's not some lowball bid. So there's a place in the market for sure for this kind of like, instant gratification. I mean, like we're all addicted to instant gratification these days. So like, who wouldn't like that? And obviously with that kind of iBuying model though, like the key for an Opendoor doing it is you got to be able to, you got to know that you're going to be able to flip that house, pretty quickly and get it off your balance sheet at, hopefully, a decent margin, they're not looking to make Google type margins on this, but they want to be able to know that they can flip it and sell it and make some money at it. And then the goal was always like, hey, what if we could like do this on a mass scale, across the US? And, the goal with like Tesla, when Tesla started, Elon's goal was, let's try to get to 10% market share, and because, well, there always will be others out there, but like 10% of a big market, can be a real business, and it's a real business in cars. And the real estate market is like one of the biggest businesses in the world. It's basically like, just in the US, it's a $20 trillion market, the residential real estate market. And then 14 trillion of that is tied to a mortgage. And basically, like in 2021, there were 6 million real estate transactions like of existing homes. I think in 2024, when things slowed down because of interest rates, we did 4 million. So in the US. So so you think about like Opendoor could get to like a 10% market share of a market where you're doing like 4 million, 5 million transactions a year. And you're making money off of that. And then maybe, hey, can we bundle some stuff later, like mortgage and title, or some other revenues, ancillary revenues to that? Now that's a real business. And obviously, they would want to take it down from like a 45-day close to ideally like it would be like a 1-day close, or and one-click buying, one-click selling, all this kind of stuff. Now, like, but they ran into some problems, like, over the last 10 years, like it wasn't, they couldn't quite move that fast. They had these longer close times. They did build a real business, but they got themselves into trouble in basically 2021 when the interest rates got jacked up. They had bought a bunch of houses previously, like at higher prices that then they were kind of stuck holding the bag for. So there was like one, so they ended up having to take a big loss. And, it sort of called into question the whole model of iBuying. Zillow and Redfin, which had copycatted Opendoor into iBuying, they, when the recession came, they were like, hey, we're out of here. This isn't our core business. We're losing tons of money at this. We're going to go back to selling ads, or we're going to go back to brokerage or whatever they did traditionally. But Opendoor didn't have a choice. They just had to kind of hunker down, kind of figure this out. But they had really lousy management. And so but they got so cheap, like on June 25th, they hit an all-time low of 51 cents. So you think like you took a bath, because you got in at $10 and I don't know where you sold, but at least you didn't hold it and sell it at 51 cents.
Right.
Like this thing was like, and the CEO though had no sense of urgency. She just she didn't do media interviews. Like I think of most tech company CEOs, like part of your job description is like every quarter you have obviously your results, and then you got to hit the road and talk to CNBC and talk to Bloomberg and Fox Business and do a bunch of podcasts like promoting your results. She did one media appearance in 3 years as CEO. I don't know why. I have no idea. But anyway, so I started this sort of campaign saying, hey, even though they've done poorly to date, there are a couple of good signs. There wasn't the good signal about insiders buying shares. In fact, it was the opposite. Like people were just like selling shares all the time. But the one thing I really liked about the Opendoor model was that they had just hit profitability. They were hinting at profitability in their current quarter. So they just announced like first time in 3 years, they had their first EBITDA positive quarter. And we're still in a really dour housing market in the US. Like it's, we're north, I think we're still north of 6% mortgage, 30-year mortgage rates. It was 7%. So there's not a lot of activity happening right now, but it didn't take a rocket scientist in July to know that we're going to get some cuts, later this year and into next year. And now we've got that. And that's really, going to be an accelerant for their business. Like the
I want to
volumes
touch
go
on.
up and everything. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I want to touch on one thing. So I'm in a hotbed of a flipping environment here in Southern California. Probably, I flipped my first house in 2016. We probably did about like roughly 250 flips over the past 9 years or so. When I saw Open Door come to my market, the wholesalers, which essentially are those folks that are just going from an individual, can go to a homeowner, get a contract, and then sell that contract to an investor, essentially that I buy model, but it was from the individual level, kind of a gray area agent. And the agents across the board kind of scared. The problem that I saw with Open Door, especially in my local market, was that they kind of blanketed it with marketing, but the
Mhm.
on the ground talent wasn't the best. And so I think that kind of moving forward, like how do you get really good talent locally and that you want to work with the agents. So one thing that I kind of see, and I was actually speaking to a larger team member yesterday when Avi told me, hey, I'm going to be interviewing with Eric, was how can you get I think there's 1.5 million licensed real estate agents that are part of the NAR, National Association of Realtors. How can those folks want to work with Open Door and like kind of change the rhetoric of we're not trying to push the 6% out, but actually, if we want to grow as a industry, how can Open Door with the existing market kind of coexist because there's so much talent in the escrow, the title, the local talent within these firms are so strong that actually benefit both parties.
Yeah.
That's I think a larger question that I would love to see Open Door try to solve.
Well, that's a good question. So first off, I'd say I think the Open Door experience really has fallen off in the last few years. So I don't know
Mhm.
exactly what year it was that you had your experience, but I would say like it seems like before 2021, most people that I've talked to who used the service like really liked it, really had like a
Mhm.
pleasurable like customer experience, similar to like you always hear people talk about that in a positive way with Carvana, even when they
Yep.
were doing badly, they liked the experience. Open Door was good prior to 2021. I think the last 3 years they've really kind of fallen off, and I think it's maybe
Mhm.
because the CEO they had just wasn't like a technology product person and didn't pay attention. But I've heard that those kinds of complaints that you mentioned. I've heard about like with in relations with the renovations, like the quality just sort of dropped off. So the point about like partnering, so hopefully that's going to change now because they've got the
Mhm.
Shopify COO
Yep.
who came and now he's the new CEO.
I love that pick, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, he put out a Google Doc like on his first day on the job. Like, if you have any complaints about your experience, fill out my Google Doc or something like this, which is great to see. But the partnering with the agents thing, like the prior CEO, the bad CEO, she was trying to do that. She was trying to say, hey, let's make peace with the agents and
Mhm.
let's have some sort of partnership. And she had a program where, maybe if you're an agent and you're looking for like some minimum bid for some client, like on a house, because maybe they have unrealistic expectations or whatever. Like you can come to Open Door and say, hey, can you give me an instant bid on this house? And then, oh yes, here it is, because they've got the technology. And then, okay, we'll split the fee or we'll give you whatever, 3% or something, of that fee. So she was trying to play nice with it. What's changed though, just in these last few weeks with the Shopify COO coming in, is that this guy named Keith Rabois, who wrote the
Mhm.
original business plan for Open Door. He's now back as the chairman of the company on the board, and he brought back a guy named Eric Wu, who was the prior CEO, and he was a co-founder too. And I would say, like, and having met Keith a couple of weeks ago, Keith and Eric, like, they're both very much committed to the fact, like, the original vision was no agent for the company,
Mhm.
and they kind of like, they couldn't quite, they had to make compromises along the way and try to do things in the real world, and it didn't quite, they left, they didn't fulfill their vision, and then the second generation people came in and they didn't do a good job either. So these two guys, Keith and Eric, they're coming back with like a vengeance, and
Mhm.
basically they're saying like, we're gonna really do it this time, and we are really gonna blow up the agent model. So I think there's probably, I mean, Keith's not an idiot, so there's probably like some middle ground for the next year or two, where they will not turn away revenue if they don't have to, and maybe like partner with the agents. But I don't think anyone should be under any illusions. I think they really think that that's going to be their ultimate competitive advantage, is by like
Mhm.
sort of, hey, this is a way to bypass kind of the traditional agent, network, and come to us direct and so forth. And that's how you're going to think about us and why you're going to think about us. And we think like over time, like people will prefer that approach versus the traditional approach. So I think that's sort of where they're currently heading.
All right, so I want to bring a fun question, and if you guys don't follow Eric, you got to follow him. He's sitting outside of Drake's house, literally in Toronto, trying to get him as part of the open army here. And we were talking about like Roddy Ricch, talking about where's the Cash App, in rap songs, and Dean Phillips, we were talking about with Belvedere Vodka, right? He sent one to Jay-Z and then completely took off. So I know you're going after Drake. Have you thought of like other rapper, like Nas is really influential?
I would actually say Nas is maybe the most the best angel investor in history of every rapper. He's been involved with Coinbase, Robinhood, Ring app that got acquired by Amazon, and several others as well. I feel like with his essentially besties with Ben Horowitz and Ace16Z, so maybe he got a little bit of help in that world as well. But Nas has been amazing in that world.
The other Canadian that we were thinking of is Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast does this where he'll call and order a pizza and then give the pizza delivery driver the keys to the house, right? So that could be an interesting play for Opendoor.
I think it's really interesting, and I think I didn't have this all planned out when I first got the idea to do the Drake thing, where my son came up with it, like the 16-year-old son. But what I've learned since is like I was approached by this guy who's like the cousin of Chris Rock, and he's like a talent manager for this like R&B artist named Jaheim in Atlanta. And he's like, Jaheim really likes what you're doing, and not just because of the Drake thing, but he's interested in me. He wants to be part of the Open Army, and can we do a call? And we did a call, and he ended up like buying Open shares. And he's like, yeah, Jaheim wants to introduce you to like some other artists. And we've had Rob Schneider, this comedian. He's bought in. Maybe he can get us an intro to like Adam Sandler or something. But I had a call like a few days ago with a guy who was a financial advisor, but he's plugged into athletes specifically, like NFL and NBA. And I guess what was kind of interesting for me talking to these advisors or managers, related to the musicians and the athletes, is they were saying like, these guys like they spend a lot of money. And, on jewelry and clothes and tattoos and stuff. And they don't always think about investment. And, they're all aware of, like you guys say, like Kevin Durant and all these guys, like, the top ones, like they get into these angel deals and VC deals. And they watch like what everybody does and how everyone makes money. So it's like, it's very common like to say, oh, man, I need my own clothing line because like, Drake's got OVO and whatever, Jay-Z's got whatever. But like, and real estate is a popular, place because everyone, whether you're an athlete or a regular person, like we all know, like we're familiar with buying and selling houses, and so that's comfortable. But investing in stocks is not usually something that they do, and so these guys were saying, we really want to like educate, our clients like that, they shouldn't take all their portfolio, but maybe like three to 5%, and put it in these kinds of names like Opendoor or Carvana, or some of these names that are, if it works out, they won't all work out, but if one does, and it is truly 100-bagger, I mean, that could be like life-changing for these guys and set them up for life because, they're not always going to be, popular artists or athletes or whatever, like that income stream is going to end at some point. And so this is sort of a way of extending it. So I think it's a really cool thing. I mean, I hope I get Drake connected and invested, but I hope like whether or not he does, like others, like athletes and artists will come in and join the retail army and kind of be a part of our team.
Mm-hmm. Last question, because I know you got 3 minutes here. What is your ultimate price target if you're open to sharing that? I think you've shared a few different numbers on your tweets, but and then just in general with investing, you've been doing it for several years. When you start to approach your price target, how do you off ramp? And then I guess piggybacking off that question is, as an influencer, as the leader of the Open Army, what happens when the general starts to sell? If that happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, fortunately, I think it's going to be a while until I sell from Opendoor, so I won't have to face that last problem. I mean, originally I thought it was going to be 82 was my original target on that July 14th tweet that you showed before. And that was just like doing kind of my initial analysis, thinking 3 years ahead. And if things worked out the way I thought they could, taking what the consensus estimates are for for the company right now from like Wall Street, which are pretty low. You know, Wall Street is assuming like 3 years from now, there'll only be a 1% national market share. Like out of the 4 or 5 million homes that get sold in 2029, like the Opendoor will only be like 1% of that share. Like earlier today, I was just kind of diving into it, and because I've heard folks say, hey, we should be trying for 10% share, you know, that was the Tesla goal, 10% share. And so I was thinking like, well, what would that equate to? And just if they got to a 10% share, like 3 years from now, assuming like we're back to kind of a normal US market where there's like 5 million sales a year, and like what kind of profits that Opendoor makes on that right now as an iBuyer, they should be like by that point a $315 stock company. So way more than their current $10 price. But that's just assuming iBuying only, and that's assuming US only. So if they ever expanded internationally, and if they did get into say something like mortgage and title, it could be like multiples of that like $300 target. Like you're talking like $500, $600, something like that. It's number, you get into numbers. It seems crazy thinking about it in relation to a $10 stock or like a 50-cent stock a little while ago. But I mean that's sort of like I think in the realm of possibility. At some point I'll have to sell, but like I'm so far from thinking of selling now because of the new CEO and the new board, and all this kind of upside is still ahead and not priced in. Like I always enjoy like seeing the Wall Street analysts kind of scramble and trying to like they just sort of think in terms of like what they can see right now, and they have to plus or minus their price target based on wherever the stock is trading. So when you start to kind of expand your mind and sort of think about like the size of the market that they're going after, and what it could look like if things really go in their direction, that's when you start thinking of these big numbers, and it almost seems like pie in the sky thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I do think it's realistic, and I don't think there's anybody else out there who could be this sort of Uber or the Amazon of real estate.
Yeah.
I really got to give it to you, Eric. Like I haven't seen someone really take over a community like on X like you have. It's kind of like Justin Bieber was got discovered on YouTube. Eric Jackson's show is getting, on X, is kind of becoming this bigger than life leader on Opendoor, which is actually really cool. So, I mean, the last question that I have is like, how can we help your overall Open Army goal as community folks or people that are also invested in the stock? Like, what is your message for folks in the Army to expand and kind of enhance the overall mission?
Well, thanks a lot. I mean, I think it's just like talk about the name. Like I was just at the pet food store before I came on with you guys, buying some food for my dogs, and I was talking to the owner who I like, and I was like, "Hey, man, have you ever heard of Open? You trade stocks?" And he's like, "Yeah, I trade stocks." Like Open? No, I've never heard of it. And I was like, "Take
That's
a look."
amazing.
It's like it's had a good run, but I think it's got a lot of upside. So I don't know, just mention it like that casually. The other thing is like. I had a Zoom a few weeks ago with Brad Garlinghouse, who's the CEO of Ripple, controls like XRP, and he owns Open too. I found out, I didn't know this, but he bought it a while ago at like $3 a share or something. He was like, I was down 75%. Thanks a lot for helping get this thing back in the green. But he said, Eric, you're great and all. Open's great. I had to mute you for about a week because every time I opened up my X, it was like all like Open, Eric Jackson. I was like too much. Like enough. There's more into the world than Open and Eric.
That's amazing. Well, I wish we had 30 more minutes, so we'll have to bring you back on. But everyone follow him at Eric Jackson. We'll post it obviously very soon. And thanks again so much for coming on.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, see you guys. Sorry to dash.
Oh, no worries.